the future, though it should be mentioned that the scale of the deficit depends on how we define the country. Analysts conclude record trade deficits aren't as threatening as they appear, the Wall Street Journal reports, because they are being driven in part by increasingly profitable U.S. companies producing abroad and shipping their goods and services back to the U.S., helping to keep overall corporate profits strong. By 2005, earnings overseas accounted for 40% of profit growth for all corporations, along with $2.7 trillion in stock market capitalization that greatly benefits the tiny percentage of the population who dominate shareholding. If we understand the country to be U.S.-based corporations rather than the population, the trade deficit accounting thus shifts markedly. Bush's signature program for improving education revealed a similar disregard for our children and the health of the society. It concentrated on testing rather than education. The heart of any serious educational program is fostering the ability to inquire and create, as discussed by one of the founders of classical liberalism and of the modern university system, Wilhelm von Humboldt. Focus on testing does not advance, and probably harms such objectives, for which quite different initiatives would be required. To paraphrase the title of Bush's educational program, virtually, no opportunity is left behind. To transfer costs to future generations in other ways. Anyone familiar with the U.S. economy is aware of what the Journal of the American Academy for the Advancement of Science calls the essential role of government-sponsored, university-based research in producing the ideas and people that drive innovation. In information technology, IT, the specific topic of these comments. The journal warns that changes in funding policy under Bush have put this innovation pipeline at risk, with funding for IT halved, threatening to derail the extraordinarily productive interplay of academia, government, and industry in IT. The interplay extends well beyond, hence also the risk posed by Bush funding policy to the innovation pipeline, the creation and development of computers, the Internet, satellites, telecommunication, along with much of the rest of electronics-based and more recently biology-based industry. Government funding is either direct, government laboratories, universities, or indirect, through support for the private sector by subsidy, procurement, and when needed, protection. Even putting aside the clear and consistent evidence about the guiding moral values, it means little to say that people vote on the basis of moral values. The question is what they mean by the phrase moral values. The limited indications are of some interest. In one poll, when the voters were asked to choose the most urgent moral crisis facing the country, 33% cited greed and materialism, 31% selected poverty and economic justice, 16% named abortion, and 12% selected gay marriage. In another, when surveyed voters were asked to list the moral issue that most affected their vote, the Iraq War placed first at 42%, while 13% named abortion and 9% named gay marriage. Other studies reveal that most of the large majorities that favor national health insurance regard it as a moral issue. Whatever voters meant, it could hardly have been the operative moral values of the administration that were celebrated by the business press. Public opinion and public policy. The most serious evidence about public opinion is provided by the studies cited earlier that were released shortly before the elections by two of the most respected and reliable institutions that regularly monitor public opinion. Evidently, such information is of crucial importance for a functioning democratic society, which is not a collection of isolated atoms, but a community of people who interact in forming opinions and policies. In the world of politics, as in science or any other endeavor, or for that matter, in everyday life, knowing what others think is an important factor in reaching one's own conclusions. That seems close to a truism. Independently, such information permits us to determine how well the political system succeeds in allowing the will of the public to enter into the formation of public policy, a defining property of democratic societies. To evaluate the state of American democracy, then, we will of course want to know what public opinion is on major issues, how it relates to public policy, and how information about it was made available to the public on the eve of a presidential election. The studies were scarcely reported, cited only in a few local press reports and scattered opinion pieces, one in the national press, Newsweek. The information kept from the public, some already mentioned, is enlightening. A large majority of the public believe that the United States should accept the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court, ICC, and the World Court, sign the Kyoto Protocols, allow the United Nations to take the lead in international crises, and rely on diplomatic and economic measures more than military ones in the war on terror. Similar majorities believe the United States should resort to force only if there is strong evidence that the country is in imminent danger of being attacked, thus rejecting the bipartisan consensus on preemptive war, and adopting the rather conventional interpretation of the UN Charter, reiterated by the UN's High-Level Panel of December 2004 and the UN World Summit a year later. A small majority of the population even favors giving up Security Council vetoes, so that the United States would follow the UN's lead, even if it is not the preference of U.S. state managers. On domestic issues, overwhelming majorities favor expansion of government programs, primarily health care, 80%, but also funding for education and Social Security. Similar results on domestic issues have long been found in these studies conducted by the Chicago Council on Foreign Relations, CCFR. As noted, other mainstream polls report that large majorities support guaranteed health care, even if it would raise taxes. Not only does the U.S. government stand apart from the rest of the world on many crucial issues, but even from its own population. One illustration of Washington's international isolation, as discussed earlier, is its having rejected World Court orders. Washington's opposition to the ICC has reached levels that have elicited considerable ridicule abroad, particularly after the passage of what many call the Netherlands Invasion Act, which authorizes the president to use force to rescue Americans brought to The Hague, a prospect about as likely as an asteroid hitting the Earth. Also, because of its extreme opposition to any thought, however remote, that ICC jurisdiction might extend to the United States and interfere with its unique ultra-sovereignty, Washington effectively prevented prosecution of crimes in Darfur, even though it insists that literal genocide is underway. Security Council Resolution 1593, March 31, 2005, under Chapter 7, which permits use of force, authorized referral of the situation in Darfur to the ICC for investigation and prosecution. The United States agreed to abstain, instead of the usual veto, it is assumed, only after language was added that prevents UN funding for the investigation, which means that it is unlikely to proceed. 2 weeks earlier, the editors of the Boston Globe had written that history will not forgive the powerful people who could have ended yet another genocide, but preferred to play their pitiless games, blaming Europe and the United States for delay on a resolution. So it stands. though the generally preferred story is that China is seen by the U.S. as the main hindrance to passing a UN Security Council resolution that would put pressure on Sudan to halt